Are we able to capture the board?
Yeah.
Have a seat. Thank you. Okay. So welcome back, everybody. This is week 3. I put my phone number on here in case anybody needs to want to call me and ask me something during the week. Feel free to call me anytime or send me a text. And there's some new people here, and that's all fine and good. You have to watch the first 2 weeks online. If you're just starting, I know a couple of you told me you did already. That's great. So this is the YouTube channel, BB Study 2025. So if you go on there, if you're anywhere in the world actually, and you can get on YouTube, you can watch this live. Like right now, it's live, and after the live is over, it automatically saves it. So it's the same channel. So you can go there and you can watch the recording, or you can watch it live, but you can't miss a week. Okay, it's very important not to miss a week. It's kind of like going to a buffet, and they got veal and filet mignon and lobster, and you're over there filling your plate with crackers and grapes, Well, if you want to eat well, you want to enjoy life, you gotta attend all of this. So it's very important if you miss one little week there. Okay, and also I wanted to let you people know that, in case you didn't know, that the name of this study that I do is called The Big Book Comes Alive. Okay, and I've been blessed and have the pleasure to do this all over the world. Which, by the way, if anybody feels like taking a road trip, some of us are already signed up. In April, we're going to Glasgow, Scotland. And we're doing a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday Big Book study. So you want to take a road trip? Come on, join us. Scotland, Glasgow. Yes. So anyway, if you look it up, you'll see the Big Book Comes Alive in Glasgow. It's pretty cool because the lady that's facilitating the thing, she sent me a text the other day. It was a flyer from 2002. Danny F. doing the Big Book Comes Alive in Glasgow 23 years ago. And they're having me back now. So that's pretty cool. Okay. The other note that I made for myself is to let you know, there's a lot of people with a lot of years of sobriety here, and that's good. You still have to figure out what you're working the steps on, okay? And I will help you work the step on whatever you're working it on. If you're new, you should be working it on alcohol and drugs. If you're not new, pick something that needs some improvement, help in your life, and I'm sure nobody in this room has it going on so perfectly that they don't need to work the steps. So that's important. Figure that out now as soon as possible. And what else did I make a note for here? So we've been just started to go into the book, and when I say that the name of this is The Big Book Comes Alive, it's because last week we finished off, we did the scale from the doctor's opinion, and we did the test tube alcoholic. And I don't know if that helped you, but it's things that we've read hundreds of times in the book, and we kind of bring it to life here when we do those little things, and it makes a lot more sense. So we'll keep doing that. This is a powerful book, The Big Book. It's I'll tell you how powerful it is. There's a couple of spots in here that Alcoholics Anonymous stamped their opinion on something, and this was published in 1939. And some of the things that I'm talking about that they've stamped their opinion on was medically proven in 1976. And as we get to that when we study, well, I'll show them to you. But that's pretty good. You show me a book that can do that. 1939, he came out saying this, and then medically proven in 1976. So that's pretty cool. All right. So let's go back to the doctor's opinion. We're on that paragraph that we did on men and women drink, essentially at the bottom of the page. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. That's where we did the scale.
What's the
XXVIII?
Yeah, my pages don't coincide with yours until we get into out of the doctor's opinion. So what I want you to know is that this is a spiritual program, and you can't intellectualize that which is spiritual. So your brilliant mind, your great thinking is not going to do it for you. And what we have, we've talked about it already. We've kind of established the fact that over and over again, it talks about mind and body, mental and physical. I think it's 156 times it says that. And so I have a mind that's destroying my body is destroying my mind. Alcohol screws my body. Alcoholism screws my mind. I can't drink because of my body. I can't stay sober because of my mind. And so alcoholism is an equal opportunity destroyer. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, or what it is. You could be from Yale or jail. You could been from Penn State or the state pen. It doesn't matter. This will kick your butt like anything else. So, and there's no chemical solution to a spiritual problem. So we kind of established the fact that we have this twofold disease. Okay, and if you weren't here for when we went over why it's not a threefold disease like some people believe, go look at the first two videos and you'll see the answer to that. Okay. So we have a twofold disease. And last week I asked you, if we have a disease of mind and body, which one can we do something about? And we established the fact, because it says it in the book, that we can do something about the physical part. We cannot put it in our body, right? So another interesting concept to think about is if we have this disease of mind and body, let's say, let's use David this week as an example. He's a good example. So if it were possible for me to take David and take a normal person. We'll have to make believe there's a normal person here since there's no normal people here. So we have a normal person here and we have David. If it were possible for me to remove David's head from the neck up and remove this normal person's head from the neck up and put this normal person's head on David's body and put David's head on this normal body, do you know what would happen? Huh? No, I'm saying if it were possible for me to do that, like Dr. Frankenstein or something, what would happen is this, very interestingly, that this David's body with this normal head on it would go to a party, and at the party they would, no, I'll have a drink, because they always had a drink or two at the party and never had any ramifications of that. And David's body, he would ignite the allergy would demand more, and the normal person in David's body would not be able to figure out why he got so messed up and he couldn't stop drinking. And you know what happened with the normal head on David's body? I mean, no, I said that backwards. I'm sorry. The normal head on David's body would take a drink and the body would want more. But the normal body with David's head on it, David's head would convince that body that he needs a drink. And eventually he would screw that body up so bad that body would become alcoholic. David's head would come out better? No, because David's head on that new body would make that new body drink. And on the new body, on the normal body on David's head, would not be able to figure out why he can't stop drinking. So in here. Yeah. All right. So let's go to the next page in the doctor's opinion, where he starts off the first paragraph, says, after they have succumbed to the desire again. And that's when we did the test tube alcoholic, right? Now look at the bottom of this. We're on the first paragraph. It says, after they have succumbed to the desire again. And then skip down a couple of sentences. Well, let me just read the whole thing. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with the firm resolution not to drink again. I swear to God, I ain't going to do this no more, right? This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. You see that? So now, and I think we talked about it, psychic change. Psychic comes from the word psyche. Psyche is of the mind, thinking. So entire psychic changes, I have to be able to change my thinking completely. All right. That's he says, unless that person can experience that, there's very little hope for them, right? So that they're setting out a problem here. And in the middle of this same page, they're giving you the answer to this. You go down 3 paragraphs. The one that says, faced with this problem, although he gives all his in him, is often not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. So there's the answer for the problem that he just set forth. That unless you can experience an entire psychic change, and now he's telling us what you need to produce that psychic change of something more than human power. So you're going to have to hook up with a higher power. You have to have a God in your life. Okay? And over again in this book, they set out problems and issues, and then they give you the answers to them. And the bottom of this page, he says, I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. And I told you before that the doctor talks a lot about the physical part of the disease, okay? I've had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal, which was to be settled on a certain date favorable to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. So again, the phenomenon of craving is a physical reaction. We talked about this, and we'll keep talking about it, because I want you to get this into your head good there, that if you don't have alcohol in your system, then you cannot have a phenomenal craving. And, but many of us say that. I've had people with months of sobriety say, yeah, I'm having a tough time. I'm really having cravings. And I said, how long you been sober? 3 months. No, you're not having a craving. You're obsessing. And they go, I don't give a shit what you call it. I want to drink bad. Right. But again, and I've said this already a couple of times, I'm going to keep saying it to you. Again, there is a difference. One is physical, one is mental. The phenomenon of craving is physical. The mental obsession is of the mind. And you can change your mind. We change our mind all the time. Yes, it's a little more difficult to change your mind when it comes to alcohol and drugs, but it's the same concept. You can change your mind. So understand the difference. You're not craving if you don't have anything in your system. So now he says here, this phenomenon craving once became paramount to all other interests so that the important appointment was not met. Now look what he says. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. Very important. They weren't drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. So let's look at that because it's important. Let's take somebody that's allergic to strawberries. Okay. They eat strawberries. When they eat strawberries, they ignite their allergy. An allergy we defined as an abnormal reaction to something, right? That's what an allergy is, an abnormal reaction. So once the person that's allergic to strawberries eats the strawberries, it doesn't matter after that how much they pray, how much they wish, how much they hope, all the willpower they muster up, they cannot stop the hives from coming because they're now dealing with something beyond their mental control. Do you understand that? Does that make sense to you? Well, that's what he's saying here. That these men took a drink a day or so prior to this point. And he says these men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. They ignited the allergy, and now they're screwed. So once you put in your system, the physical reaction to that is a craving, a phenomenon of craving. Does everybody understand that? Question?
I think he's also saying is that we can't help ourselves from drinking when things are going bad. And he's saying, no, I've known guys where things are going great and they still can't get stuff.
Right. It doesn't matter. But the focus here is not on whether something good was happening or something bad was happening. The focus is on they took a drink and then they set the allergy off. Now, and after they took a drink, it's the old saying again, a man takes a drink, the drink takes the drink, the drink takes the man, right? So the focus here is it's not so important whether it was happy drinking or bad, sad drinking, it doesn't matter because we drink, we don't really need excuse to drink.
Because it's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday, yeah, there you go. But the focus is on what happened once they took a drink, because that's what it says here. They took a drink a day or so prior to the and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, but the important point was not met. And he says there are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. And just so you understand, the supreme sacrifice is suicide. People kill themselves. Literally kill themselves rather than to fight and go on and deal with this. So now he's going to give us an example of 5 different types of alcoholics. Not that there are only 5 types, but he's focusing on these 5 types. He says the classification of alcoholics seems most difficult and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths. That's your first type. The psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. I know you probably don't know anybody like that. We're all familiar with this type. Oh, we do know somebody like this. Okay. They're always going on the wagon for keeps. They're over remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. What's a resolution? Understand the resolution? Yeah, it's a thought. It's usually good thought. You know, it's usually a good thought. Like if I make a resolution, it's a good thought. But it's not a decision. A decision, and we'll learn this later in the steps also, a decision implies further action. Okay? A decision implies further action. A resolution doesn't. Okay. Now, the second type, there is the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. There's so that's the second type of alcoholic. The guy that, okay, I'm not going back to that bar. I'll go over here, or I'll drink wine instead of whiskey or whatever. All right. Then there's the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. That's another type. Okay. There is the manic depressive type who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. So that's the fourth type, the manic depressive. The manic depressive just means somebody that has great highs and really bad lows, all the way up and all the way down and no middle of the ground. They're just, crazy, running around crazy, or they're just totally depressed. And that's the manic depressive type. Then he says, then there are types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They are often able, intelligent, and friendly people.
That's me.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. We're going to use you for a minute. Let's go to page 24 in your book real quick. And the second paragraph says, the almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hastily and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. Okay, go to page 38. And remember, we've established that this is a textbook. And the way you study a textbook is you refer one page to another and back and forth. And then go down to the second full paragraph where it says, you may think our illustration is too ridiculous. He says, however intelligent we may have been in other respects where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. Strangely insane. Now, those three things that this thing that we read in the doctor's opinion, the thing we just read on page 24, and the thing that we just read on page 38, and we're going to use Ricky as an example because that's her, she said. So let's say that all of us are up in the mountains and we went on a big camping trip, all of us. That would be pretty crazy, right? Especially me, I don't camp. But we're all up in the woods, right? And then we're going to the lodge that night and we're all sitting around and there's a big wood burning stove there. And Ricky comes in and she says, watch out, everybody. Watch this. I'm going to be able to touch the stove and not burn myself. And she touches the stove and Doug's got to take her to the hospital. And the next night, we're all back in this lodge again with the wood burning stove. And here comes Ricky with her right hand all bandaged up. And she says, everybody step aside. Watch this. And she puts her left hand on the stove. Don't do that, Rick. No. This time it'll be different. And she touches the stove again. And Doug's got to take her to the hospital. And when Doug takes her to the hospital, I say to you guys, that Ricky, she's an able, intelligent, friendly kind of person. But when it comes to wood burning stove, she ain't got a damn bit of sense. And the truth of the matter is, Ricky is an able, intelligent, friendly kind of person. But when it comes to alcohol and drugs, she ain't got a damn bit of sense. Sounds right. You get it? So that's what they're talking about here. That we're often able, intelligent, and friendly kind of people. And There's a complete failure of defense that keeps one from putting their hand on a hot stove. And however intelligent we may be in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. So anytime you're in doubt, think of Ricky touching the wood burning stove. Okay. So at the bottom of that, so he says, okay, the next paragraph says, all these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. Right? He doesn't say they can. The one thing in common is that they develop the phenomenon of craving. He doesn't say that. He says that they have one thing in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. So the drinking is what causes the phenomenon of craving. Okay. And I shared with you guys last week, I think, that it is possible for an alcoholic to take a drink and not set the allergy off. But if you're too far gone in this disease, then it's not possible. So most of us, by the time we get here, we're past that point. And the book talks about that too. That, so by the time we get here, we're probably alcoholic. But, and I'm going to say this too, you have to understand something, that the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous was written not so much for the alcoholic, but for the potential alcoholic. Yes, it was written for the alcoholic, but it was what the purpose that they had in that was they wanted to save you from going through the damage and the pain and the sorrow and the hurt that they went through. And the book says that. Okay, we'll get to that page. So they wrote this book so they could raise the bottom, because the truth of the matter is this, that most of the people that come in the rooms today, and don't go out of here thinking you're one of them, but most of the people coming in the rooms today are not yet alcoholic, real alcohol, potential alcohol. Most of us are on the fringe, I know somebody here is thinking, that's right, that's me. Real alcoholic. I'll prove that when I get home. Watch this. Yeah.
They said you have no chance.
There's a very thin line between the potential alcoholic and the real alcoholic. There is a difference, but it's not so abundant. Yeah. And so he says, it has never been by any treatment which we are familiar permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. And people, when he says entire abstinence, he's also talking of the mind, not just talking physical, not just talking taking a drink or a drug. Entire abstinence. Stop playing with this shit. Stop thinking that you can, this time it'll be different. That's probably the greatest lie that we tell ourselves. This time it'll be different. We have thousands of lies, but that's probably the biggest one. This time it'll be different. No, it won't. Or yeah, maybe it will be. It'll be worse. Yeah. Okay. So go over to the last page in the doctor's opinion. Has anybody got any questions so far on anything we've covered in the doctor's opinion? I think yes.
What do you do with somebody, you said before that you have spirits, a higher power in life? What if somebody doesn't have a high? And then is it, we talk about the group?
Well, the book says we can use the group when we first start. Yeah, but it does not say we can stay with that. It does not say that we can stay with that. We have to move on from. Well, that we're going to cover that deeply when we get to the second step. We will cover that deeply, but if they don't believe and they don't come to believe, they're screwed. The group is a power greater than us, and if you can, when I got here, they told me, because I didn't get sober to find God. I wasn't. My dad was God, when I was 10, he died, and after that, I had no God. I tried to take his place and become God. And so when I got here, I wasn't just loveless and clueless and hopeless and helpless. I was godless. And when they told me, well, why don't you use the group, Danny? The group is a power greater than yourself. And I looked around the room and I went, because, they tried that shit when, you got to get somebody that's, listen, you people didn't have anything I wanted when I got here. You really didn't. But you know what I came in touch with? I didn't want what I had anymore. I couldn't live with what I had anymore. So the guy says to me, Danny, collectively, everybody in this room, can they kick your ass? And I said, oh, yeah, of course. Well, then collectively, they can help you. So this is a power greater than ourselves. Tap into that. It's not going to keep you sober, but we'll get to that when we get to that. When we get there, we'll get there. Because, the book says, when you go right to, let's just look at it real quick in page 45, second paragraph, kind of towards in the middle, it says, therefore, we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, we're going to talk about God. So we're going to talk about God. We're going to talk a lot about God. And if that runs you out of these rooms, see you. I don't make any, yeah, I don't, it is what it is. And God isn't a necessity or whatever you choose to call your Bible. Huh? I can't hear you. What's that? If they're lucky. If they're lucky, whiskey will run them back in there. But a lot of people aren't that lucky. They leave and they don't ever get to come back. Some of them come back 20 years later. You've heard that many times, right? So, but listen, did we talk about this last week where people say, I just chose to drink? Yeah. No, you didn't. If you're an alcoholic and you understand the ramifications of what happens to you and the people all around you in your life that you love, and if that's what's really going on for you, you don't want that no more. Don't try to convince me that you chose to take a drink. No, you didn't. Because you already swore that you're not going to do that no more.
So why did I?
Because you didn't do the things necessary to not take a drink. And you didn't have a spiritual experience. And you didn't enlarge the spiritual experience. And so the big book says, and we'll get to it as we go over this, but the big book says there's two reasons why people go back out. Two reasons. One of them, I think, is in 12 and 12. It says the first step is the only step we have to do 100%. So people don't do the first step 100%. And the other thing that the big book says, and why people go back out, is they fail to enlarge their spiritual life. You've read that before, right? They fail to enlarge. But here's the problem, and this happens too many times. Somebody gets sober, and they ask somebody to sponsor them, and that sponsor says, are you powerless over alcohol? Yeah. Is your life unmanageable? Oh, yeah. Okay. Are you believing in God? I don't know. Are you willing to believe in God? I don't know. You willing to believe that I believe in God? Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. You willing to make a decision, turn your will in life on? I don't know. All right, let's do a fourth step. And before anything happens, before any amount of time has passed or work has been done, they're on a fourth step. And they have bypassed 25% of this program. Because there's 12 steps here. And so if you haven't done a thorough first step, you're going to probably drink again. And I promise you, I told you before, we're going to be on step one for probably 6-7 weeks. Because we will be thorough. And once we're done with step one, I keep saying this, I know, you will understand the truth about yourself. And once you understand the truth about yourself, you'll never be able to drink or use on that truth again. Never be able to do it. The only way you'll be able to drink or use after you understand the truth about yourself is you block yourself off from the truth and you buy some insane lie.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you're saying one of the reasons is that they don't fully take one, are you talking about one or are you talking about conceding to your innermost self? Which
Now, when I say they what?
when you're saying that one of the two reasons that people go back out, one of them is you're saying they didn't take step one fully.
Then you take 100%.
Okay, so the first step is in that first step, or are you talking about the first step as in? Okay. All right. Okay.
For now, we can say that they didn't take 100% first step.
Okay. All right.
She's referring to the step before the step. There is a step before the first step. I asked you guys a week or so ago, last week, I think, I asked you, what is the first step in recovery? And you remember that? I asked you, what is the first step in recovery? And, everybody answers, admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives are becoming unmanageable. No, it's not. That's the first of the 12 steps. But it's not the first step in recovery, which what Ricky's referring to. Go to page 30 in your book. Go to page 30 in your book. Second paragraph says, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. Look what it says next. This is the first step in recovery. So the first step in recovery comes before the first of the 12 steps. We're going to get to that. Again, though, it's important to understand this. If you do not do with this exercise on page 30, it would be impossible for you to go to page 59 and take the first of the 12 steps. There's nothing you can do with that. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. The only thing you can do with that is agree with that. Yeah, that's right. That's all you can do. But on page 30, it sets you up to do something where you fully concede to your innermost self that you're alcoholic. And then when you get to page 59, you can do this at a level and a depth that you weren't able to do it before that exercise. So that's how we're going to finish off the first step, is doing that exercise. Anyway, go back to the doctor's opinion. On the top of the last page of the doctor's opinion, it says, however, he did become sold, in parentheses, on the ideas contained in this book. What does that mean? What is he really saying there? If he became sold on the idea of this book, that's a little bit more than agreeing with it, a little bit more than understanding it. Sold is he went in and he bought this thing, and he owns it, or she owns it. So if you are sold on the ideas in this book, and you own it, and it's hard to lose something that you hold on to with dear life. That little story that the two kids that cut school and they go to the lake and they're playing around the lake, and one kid goes out and a little bit up to the water, and the current takes him out a little bit, and he starts yelling for help, and his friend don't know what to do, and he sees a branch over there, and he throws the branch, the kid grabs the branch and he pulls him in there, and he's huffing and he's puffing, and they get up and they walk away, and the kid that was on the shore looks at, well, you can let go of that branch now, you don't need it. I'm never going to let go of this. It saved my life. No. And I am never going to let go of this program of Alcoholics Anonymous that we have available to us, because it saved my life. And I own this. I truly own this. And that's where you need to be. You need to own this. And he says, I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through And though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. So he's telling us to read the book through. He's not telling us to read the first 164 pages. I hear that shit in the rooms all the time. First 164 pages. No. Doesn't tell us anywhere in this book to read the first 164 pages. In fact, the whole back of the book is all step 2. All the stories in the back of the book is all about step 2. It's all about how somebody came in contact with their higher power and made a relationship with their higher power. That's step 2. And there's all different examples of that. So it says to read the book through. That means from the beginning to the end, not the first 164 pages. All right, now we're on Bill's story. And Bill's story is it's an example of the problem. It's here for you to identify with. And let me explain to you why. I don't like going too much into the history. I do a whole workshop on the history of AA, but so back in 1935, Bill Wilson was in Towns Hospital, and Dr. Silkworth shared with Bill the disease that he had. And he shared with him the mental and the physical part of the disease. We just read Dr. Silkworth's writing on that, right? The mental and the physical part of the disease. So Bill left Towns Hospital understanding what is the problem. Remember the 3 parts of this program? The 3 parts of the recovery part of this program? What is the problem is the first part. Bill Wilson left there. Not long afterwards, an old friend of his, Ebby Thatcher, came over to see him. That's the story that's in the book, right? He was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed or something like that, Bill said. And anyway, when Ebby came over, he was sober, and he was a member of the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group was a religious organization that thought they had found the cure for alcohol. There was a group 100 years before that called the Washingtonians. And they were a religious organization, and they thought they had found the cure for alcoholism. And both of them failed because that's one of the reasons Bill put the traditions in place. And that's why we've never failed. But anyway, when Ebby came over, he shared with Bill what the solution was, the second part. And he shared with Bill what the program of action was. The Oxford Group had 6 steps that they worked. You can find that in your book somewhere. I don't know what the 4th edition, I don't know what page it's on anymore. But anyway, Bill Wilson became the first person on earth armed with all 3 things necessary to recover from alcoholism. He understood what the problem was, he understood what the solution was, and he understood what the program of action was. He was the only person that had those 3 things. And shortly afterwards, he went to Akron, Ohio on a business trip. And he got introduced to Dr. Bob, who surprisingly enough was a member of the Oxford Group. But Dr. Bob couldn't stay sober either. You know why? He didn't know what the problem was. Dr. Bob had a solution and a program of action, but he didn't know what the problem was. Bill shared with him what the problem was, and Dr. Bob became the second person on earth armed with all 3 things necessary to recover from alcoholism. He understood what the problem was, what the solution was, and what the program of action was. So then they started going around. Bill stayed in Ohio for a while, and he brought his wife out there, and hospitals and people's homes after coming off a binge. And we're passing it again, and please, so you understand, that's not the 7th tradition. It's to pay for the room and the coffee that we drink. Okay, for those of you that don't know, I'll say it again. This is not an AA meeting. This is a private big book study. But anyway, Dr. Bob and Bill were going around, and they were meeting people that just came off a binge. And they'd go to the hospital, and they'd see them. It's the picture that you see around. I don't know if there's one hanging up in here, but this picture of the guy in the hospital, in the bed, And the two guys that guy, his name was Bill Dobson. He was AA number 3, Bill D. But, so they would go back, they would go and they would share with them what the problem was, what the solution was, what the program of action was. And Bill Dobson came out of the hospital and joined them, and he became AA number 3. Okay. And the reason I told you all that is to explain to you why they have Bill's story here as the first chapter after the doctor's opinion, really chapter 1. And because they were thinking when they started writing this book a few years later, their dilemma was, how are we going to do the hospital visit? How are we going to describe the hospital visit that we go and we speak to these people that just came off a bed? How are we going to do that? And somebody came up with the idea, Bill, you tell them your story. And so that's why it's here. So Bill's story is an example of the problem, and it's here for you to identify. Now, the first 4 pages of this is really not relevant to us. You could put your own story in there. This is mostly about Bill. You know, one of the things I like is that he had arrived, you know. He says he had arrived, you know. The difference between somebody sober and somebody not sober, a newcomer, like before I, you know, got sober, I'd walk into a room and I'd go, here I am. And now I walk into a room and I go, oh, there you are. You know, that's the difference between a sober person and somebody that's on a spiritual path and somebody that's not. So the first 4 pages they're kind of relevant to. So go to page 5 in Bill's story. Now, the first paragraph, page 5, says, liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day and often 3, got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. A tumbler full of gin, followed by a half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hopes. Now, if it's possible for you, make believe you're a normal person. Just for a few minutes. Just for a few minutes, make believe you're normal. What's normal? All right, well, okay, better to my point. If somebody besides us were to read that paragraph, a normal person were to read that paragraph, they would go, oh my God, this guy is sick. He's waking up, shaking violently. He needs a tumbler full of gin and 6 bottles of beer just so he can eat breakfast. Oh my God. But what does Bill say? Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation. Is that a typical friggin' alcoholic or what? Now, I never said nevertheless, but I said the same thing. I got this. I got control over this. You see the mentality? Because the first time I read Bill's story, I didn't relate. And what you have to do as you're studying this book is you have to replace what Bill is doing and his environments and things with what you were doing and the feelings, and look for the similarities, because there are plenty of them. Like there's a point where Bill was hiding some booze around the house, you know, so his wife didn't see it, you know, get him through the next day or whatever. And, you know, I never did that, but I sure as hell put my dope all over the house. And I put it so many places I couldn't remember half of them. I'd be tearing the house out looking for shit that I thought I put somewhere. So when I learned how to do that, then I understand and I relate to Bill's story. I put my thing in it. And if you're working the steps on something other than alcohol and drugs, let's talk about this for a minute. Because that's why I tell you, you need to figure out what you're working the steps on. You can work the steps on anything, okay? In fact, after you go through this process, you should start working the steps on something other than alcohol and drugs. I tell you, somebody recently said to me, 12 years sober, just doing the steps again. I said, oh, cool. What are you working the steps on? They said, alcohol and drugs. I said, why? Why would you work the steps on alcohol and drugs? You're 12 years sober. I don't think you have a problem with alcohol and drugs. But I bet you there's a whole bag of shit that you can improve your life with. Pick one of those things out. And so whatever you wind up working the steps on, understand this. The problem is only in step one. The problem is addressed only in step one. Look at our book. Look at our literature. Alcohol is only addressed in step one. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, just in step one. So whatever you're working the steps on, the only difference is step one. Instead of alcohol or drugs, fill in the blank. The other 11 steps are exactly the same as they are right now. You don't change them. So you don't, if you're working the steps on let's say gambling, if you're doing that, you don't work the steps, you don't work the fourth step, you don't write a fourth step on gambling. You write a fourth step on what the book tells us to write a fourth step on. 4 things: resentment, fear, sexual conduct, harms to others.
Mm.
The book specifically says to write down those 4 things in an inventory. Specifically says that. So if you're working the steps on shopping or gambling or slutting around or whatever you're working the steps on. Oh, none of you slutting around. I guess I was the only one that did that shit, huh? Oh boy. So whatever you're working the steps on, it's only the first step that you address that. Very important. Even if it's alcohol or drugs, it's only step one that we address that. After we pass step one, we're not talking about the problem anymore. The problem is only addressed in step one. Step 2 is the solution. Steps 3 to 12 is the program of action that takes us there. And the same holds true for whatever you're working the steps on. Step 1 is the problem. Step 2 is the solution. The rest is the program of action. All right. So anyway, a tumbler full of gin followed by a half a dozen bottles of beer just to eat breakfast. Nevertheless, still thought I could control the situation. Look what he says next. Gradually, things got worse. I think they wind up losing the house and the business, whatever. And then he got a good deal going and he got drunk and messed it all up. Now he says, the 4th paragraph down, he says, I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw that I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so did I. And so what he's doing here is he's sicking his willpower on this alcoholism. Get him, Will. This had to be stopped. I swear to God, I'm not going to do this again. I mean it this time. I'm serious. I can remember nights when I come home after 2 or 3 days and I'd go into the bathroom and I'd look at myself in the mirror and I'd say, what's the matter with you, Danny? Why can't you stop this shit? You're weak. And I look at myself and I say, I swear to God, I'm never going to do this again. I mean it with every fiber of my being. And when I get up the next day, I was right back at it again. That's powerless, people. That's what we need to get in touch with. When you swear you're never going to do it again, and when every fiber of your being you don't want to do it again, but you find yourself doing it again, damn it, that's powerless. That's powerless at its finest. So I want to say this to you, and I want you to pay attention to this. any condition you have on your sobriety, any condition you have on your sobriety, you have no sobriety at all. You're just fooling yourself. You're full of shit, you don't know it.
Yeah.
Give you an example on that? Okay, my wife takes me back. I'm not married, but when I was married and I was running on, if she's cool, you know, then I'll stop drinking. What there could be 1,000 different examples. Any condition that I have on my sobriety, I have no sobriety at all. Any condition you have upon your sobriety, you have no sobriety at all. You only have that condition thereof. And if that condition goes away, so now you don't need to stay sober because the condition is gone. You know, that's why I love people that are new and they come in to me and they say, this program is great. I love this program. My partner took me back and I got my job back and the dogs let me pet him again. And this program really works. And next week I'll have 30 days, you know. What happens is that God will give you a little grace when you first get sober to get your shit together and do what you're supposed to do. And in that little bit of time, if you don't do that, you won't get to stay around. And so any condition that you have on your sobriety, you have no sobriety. You know, the judge could tell you, if you get caught in public intoxication again, you're going to jail. Oh, I'm going to AA. And you go to AA and you go, I can't drink. The judge's going to put me in jail. And then you go back to court 4 months later and the judge says, okay, good for you. You did good. All right. Charges dismissed. And you go out and celebrate.
Yeah.
Because the condition on your sobriety is gone. So any condition you have, sometimes it's a little more sneaky and subtle than that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some people come into AA and they're looking for a better job. They're looking for a girlfriend. They're looking for a car. They're looking for a place to live. And you know what? Honestly, you come in here, you might find a car and a house and a girlfriend and you know, and all that, but you won't find sobriety because you have all these conditions on your sobriety. Yeah. Good point. All right. Anybody else got a question or something they want to talk about? Because we got a few minutes left. I don't want to get into something new. Go.
Bill's story. Especially in the first page. Well, I just want to hear your opinion about it. All through the book, but we don't talk about this, is what a huge part Bill's ego plays in trial. Drugs, alcohol is needed. Affects.
Well, I think the solution to that is all throughout the book. You know, smashing the ego is you know, I mean, in AA we have a acronym. You know, that ego is edging God out. You know, so when we get to the point when we start talking about God, you know, there's a lot of points in here that we're going to go over that refer to that. I'm just getting ahead of ourselves with that, but yeah, you know, his ego is no different than half of us in this room. You know,
All that.
yeah. Well, that's why I said that part that I like is I have arrived. You know, that's just friggin' ego. You know. Yeah, yeah. Your ego is not your friend. You know. Anybody else? Come on, I got a couple minutes left. I got a question.
I have a comment, I don't know that well, I don't know where that came from, but it talks about, this that we were talking about before,
that we go back to drinking. And it says something about we have no recollection of the last weeks of our drinking or month or the last, I can't quote it verbatim, but, and I think that that is like just another thing about alcoholism and being powerless over alcohol, that we can't recall those times. It just leaves us, you know, I mean, I could have got a DUI last night and wake up this morning and go, oh, well, this sounds like a really good idea, you know, to have a drink or to have several.
Well, what happens is sometimes in your alcoholism, you have a blackout and you really don't know you're operating. I remember before I got sober, I was in the after hour club in the Bronx. And I remember ordering a drink, another drink. And the next thing I do, I opened my eyes and I was going through a telephone pole with my car about a half a block from my house. But I had to leave that club. I had to drive 5 or 6 blocks to the highway. I had to go through a highway, pay a toll, and go through another highway, and then drive about 2 or 3 miles to get to the spot where I came to. So I did all of that in a blackout. So of course I have no recollection of any of that. But you know, next day I didn't care about the car. I went back and said, did I pay my tab here? No. Because this is my place. I got a drink. Yes.
But you didn't talk about honesty, which is on page 58, about how people who don't recover don't give themselves fully to this program, usually because they can be honest.
Constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves, yeah. But the honesty there is not what most people think it is. The honesty, that they use that word 2 or 3 times in that paragraph. And the honesty there is not about cash register honesty, or I lied. Bill never set us up to fail. He's not telling us, oh, you lied, you're not honest. No, the honesty they're talking about there is what happens to me when I take a drink. Let me play that tape through and follow it through. That's the honesty there. And people that, but the people that can't get sober are the people that are constitutionally capable of being honest with themselves. What I'm talking about, what I made a comment was why do people relapse? And the people that are not constitutionally capable, they didn't relapse. They never were sober. They might have been in a period where they weren't drinking. But sobriety is a little bit different than not drinking. All right, same time, same channel next week, guys. Thank you.
If you got a table out, I'll put it away. Thank you.